Hello, class. After having read the textbook chapter, I just wanted to give you a little bit more information about subject headings, a few extensions and clarifications on the information that was in the book. So to start with, I want to talk about delimiters. A delimiter is the symbol that is used to indicate the beginning of a new subfield. If you're using the OCLC's connection client, the symbol is the double-crossed bar. But for our purposes, and in any kind of literature that you read about MARC records, the symbol that will be used will be the $sign. So use the $sign in any records that you are going to be creating for me. I also wanted to talk briefly about retrieval and precision. Retrieval is the amount of records retrieved from a search. So if a search generates a large amount of records, the search term is said to have good retrieval. Precision is the ratio of relevant results to the total number of records received. So if a search generates 50 records and only 25 of them are relevant to the user, then the search only has 50% precision. 25 out of 50 records are relevant. So you may be saying, well, how is this relevant to subject headings? Well, a keyword search often will generate a large amount of records or have good retrieval, but it might not necessarily have good precision. The majority of records may not be relevant to the user. But a subject heading search will often have lower recall or retrieval, but will usually often have much higher precision. So that's something to keep in mind while you are thinking about information retrieval and thinking about assigning subject headings. Scope notes. Our textbook briefly mentions scope notes as notes in subject authority records that tell us how that subject heading may be applied. I think it's very important that you read scope notes, especially when applying subject headings that you aren't familiar with. They tell us when and in what context a subject heading can be applied. So in this example, we know that actresses may be applied to a work about female stage actors or may be applied in tandem with more specific headings such as television actors and actresses. But if the work is about both male and female actors, the subject heading actors should be applied instead. So it's telling us when we can use this subject heading and when we can't use it. Alright, I also want to talk a little bit about the problem with controlled vocabulary. So it is very helpful to librarians and expert searchers because it helps them to group and find related works, but there are a lot of problems with it. One of the problems is that the words that people choose to associate with the text are often very different from the Library of Congress subject headings assigned to that work. So a recent study found that librarians who are given text and illustrations and asked to name the concepts in the text were only able to match Library of Congress subject headings assigned to those texts 25% of the time. So we know that there's a little agreement between the names that people use colloquially and the names recommended by the Library of Congress. So as a result, it is probably going to be very hard for students to find text if the keywords they're using to search are very different from the subject headings assigned to those texts. Specifically related to Library of Congress subject headings, the Library of Congress doesn't have the best reputation of keeping headings up to date and unbiased. If you remember from our readings, new headings need to go through a lengthy consideration process before they're added to the LCSH. So this has led to controversy over specific terms. So for example, up until 1994, Library of Congress was still using the term Afro-Americans instead of African Americans. Feminism wasn't added until after 1980, and to this day, subject headings for materials on gay, lesbian, and transgendered persons are often misleading or just not even there. Subject headings can be misleading. One example is the term beauty culture. It's used in place of the much more prominently used term cosmetology. One advocate for unbiased and non-misleading subject headings is Sanford Berman, who I think formerly was the head cataloger of Hennepin County Library in Minnesota. He went so far as to build up his own subject headings, which built upon the Library of Congress subject headings, but they aren't biased. They much more accurately represent what patrons are looking for. And you can read about him more in the further reading resources on the Moodle page for today. I wanted to talk again a little bit about personal name headings and the indicators for personal name headings. The indicator 0, the first indicator 0 for personal name indicates that the person is only known by one word. So the example given in the text was Diana, the former Princess of Wales. She's only known by the word Diana. She doesn't have a last name associated with her. Most names are going to have an indicator 1, indicating that the person is known by a forename and a surname, and that name will be listed in inverted order. So Hillary Clinton has a forename, Hillary, and a surname, Clinton, and that name is listed in inverted order, Clinton, Hillary Rodham. And the last and most frequently used, or the least frequently used indicator is the 3. And the 3 indicator just tells us that the personal name being described is only a surname, so it represents the entire family, anybody who has that last name. So the example I have here is the Hatfield family. Another kind of heading that you might see in records, especially if you're copy cataloging, are genre headings. And genre headings are provided by the Guidelines on Subject Access to Individual Works of Fiction, Drama, etc., or they're also called GSAFD headings. They're applied to fictional works in addition to Library of Congress subject headings and Sears headings. Some examples of genre headings are adventure fiction, western stories, mystery stories. They will appear in a 655 field with a second indicator of 7 and a subfield 2 after the heading listing GSAFD as the source of the heading. So don't be surprised if you see those on some records that you're looking at. And lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about 690s. A 690 field is generally used to collocate works that have special importance or meaning to a library. So many libraries in North Dakota add a 690 field to records by authors who are from North Dakota. So like any books by Louise Erdrich are going to have a 690 field with a subject heading of North Dakota author. So it helps patrons to find materials by local authors. Other libraries might put in a 690 field in records in which the materials or money for the materials were donated by a specific donor. So it's part of a specific collection, like the Burdick collection. So I hope that gave you a little better understanding of subject headings.